Hi, everybody. I'm Leon. I'm a developer advocate here at Zencoder. Usually, Shantanu is the one that talks first, but today you've got me, and as my guest, I here have Ankur. Ankur is the co-founder of Harvest. Harvest is basically, well, I'm sure you'll put it better than me, but you know what? I'll let you introduce it.
Yeah.
Ankur, go ahead.
Hey, my name is Ankur. I'm a co-founder of Harvest. We provide structured context for developers. That includes things from API documentation, your Notion, Slack. We bring it all together so you get clean, injectable context while you're building software.
Okay. Yeah. Awesome. I know that you've probably used a couple of AI coding tools at this point, right? I would love to know how this journey started because I've been building with these tools from the start, and the way that these tools can now basically run instead of like a back and forth conversation where you're copy and pasting for like 30 seconds, 30 seconds output, then you respond, then back and forth conversation, and now you have really long running executions where you can hopefully walk away for minutes, if not hours on end, to trust that the AI is gathering context appropriately. So where did this journey begin for you?
Yeah. We started using kind of coding agents and AI. We've been using AI for a while. I think the aha moment was actually when Claude Claude 4 dropped. That was like we were like, holy moly! The things you can do now are like it's very much it's like kind of a binary switch where it really just started to understand like the AI was able to really understand. I think there was two components. It one understood the output and errors from like concept control kind of actions the agent would take, and it really understood what to do next. I think that was just a big turning point for us. And as a result of that, we were like, the next step, everything we want to do is just give it more of the context about what we're thinking through, right? Like what is the business context? Like we quickly saw our job changing from writing code to building a larger, the architect system, and more of it like if it is a curve of like writing code versus architecting systems and thinking through system design and understanding how it fits into the user's problems, but also how it fits into external systems. Job just like we just see it shifting and shifting more and more. We love
Yeah.
writing code, so
Yeah.
we still do it. We are seeing definitely the industry changing. The daily work is changing. It's honestly just becoming a lot more creative, and we found the need for kind of faster, more salient, more structured context from our daily tooling that it was really missing as a single kind of source of like, hey, this is like my kind of like my Jarvis for building software, right? It's like this missing component of like my daily work. And even if I have connections or MCPs to different tools, the coding agent just it misses a lot. It frequently, if you have Notion, Slack, um, API documentation, all these connected, it just doesn't string them together well. And I think a lot of that has to do with how the coding agents, how the agents are trained. You don't know always how to use the MCPs correctly.
That's actually an interesting point, right? Like you kind of hope off the bat that for at least some of the bigger platforms out there, some of the more well-known APIs that you're working with, there's a good chance that that's already been part of the training set for the model, right? So really big providers, I don't know, I don't even have to throw names out there, but even if, I think that's actually sort of like a trapdoor, right? Because if the training or if the API reference hasn't been part of the training set at all, well, then you're probably looking at the agent using whatever resources at its disposal to try to fetch that data, right? Either a web search, which is hit or miss. I'm sure you know better than me. Or
Yeah.
B, right? What's the alternative there, right? The alternative is that some version of that API reference was part of the training set. And by the time the model was released, that training set for that reference, that version is already out of date, right? So that's actually even a more dangerous situation. But
yeah, you'll see it use wrong parameters, the wrong types because it's an older version. That's exactly right. So we see like there's an implementation problem, an implementation detail problem for more frequently, frequently changing APIs for sure.
So the way I think, like, okay, I've been an integration engineer and full stack engineer, and the way I think about context for the agent, right? There's the context of the code base that you're in, and that for an agent is pretty easy to fetch if it has access to like file search tool calls, right?
Right.
Then there's the larger context of organizational patterns. So for example, if your organization has an API, how does that API structure, right? And again, the agent has more access to that context, either through internal documentation or with Zencoder, you can use multi-repo search to actually draw in the context of the very API repository itself. But then you have that third layer, right, of external services, external APIs, where me as an engineer, I don't have the context to know whether something is gelling right or wrong, right? Like, at least with my own API or my own platform, I can tell whether the things that the agent is recommending is adhering to the patterns and the frameworks that we use, right? For something like external documentation, I just don't have that inner compass, no matter how experienced I am with our own platform. And so how does Harvest help address that sort of third layer, that outer orbit of context that you just can't get no matter how well versed you are with your own organization?
Yeah, I think I think you framed it like really well. It's not just about writing the perfect code. It's making sure you understand how your system is integrating with, Stripe has a bunch of different ways to integrate into their payment system, right? They have an optimal way, probably, but there's not really a clear way to know if you're doing it correctly. And you also don't really know if this is going to scale in a particular fashion, right? Because we don't know the Stripe systems. We don't know the systems that are built externally, right? We know we write our own code. We have a lot of context on how that system works. The hardest part is not just, there's two steps. It's system design, actually integrating so your system scales properly, and then obviously the implementation needs to actually write the code. And both are a problem in a pain. What we find is that the structured data that we provide on API documentation also takes into account not just implementation details, but also that system retrieval. The part that you actually want to know, like, hey, how does particular components of an external system fit with mine, and help the agent be able to put together those puzzle pieces, help you understand it as well. That's actually a missing component as well. And we provide kind of that like safety net or membrane kind of around your software that helps you be like, okay, I know that Harvest is going to help me not just write the code, but make good decisions on how to integrate into these pieces.
So in terms of good decisions, right? Okay, so like from a technical perspective, you're talking about slotting in the right puzzle pieces, because with really robust online documentation sets, there's also a real risk that you're overstuffing the goose, right? So for example, if you take something like Vercel's documentation, right? Vercel has reams and reams of documentation, both for the platform and then for Next.js, right? The web framework. And so, Next.js has like page router, app router, and those are two different ways of building out the same framework, but app router is just that newer version, right? But if you go to that actual documentation set, they're both there, right, in the API portal. They can both be selected by the agent as the correct way, right? Because there's no inherently wrong way. That's why they're both there in the first place. So how does Harvest moderate, in a sense, or optimize for all the information that's out there? Which one is the right one, the more appropriate one in this data set, this documentation set for the use case?
Yeah, I mean, next you like nailed the perfect use cases, right? Because we've run into the Next.js one on a regular basis as well. So
Yeah.
what we do is the big component of actually structuring web data is we convert it into entities, right? By being able to convert it into objects that are kind of unique, right, and separate, you can actually filter on them without having to you can let the agent actually run the filter. So the agent itself will be able to say, hey, only use page rank. And we will use that as a hard filter against the documentation, right? Because we've actually structured the documentation in a way that makes sense. It's not just you're looking for like a version or a page router or app router will often get lost inside of like web page chunks that you store in like a retrieval, like a vector store or rag storage. We actually pull the important pieces out so you can do hard filtering on them and you'll be able to quickly cut down the space that you need to find documentation.
So let me throw another example at you, right? I don't know if you've ever worked or tried to work with Stripe documentation, but it's a bear, right?
It used to be better. It used to be better.
It used to be better?
Yeah, I think it used to be a lot simpler.
Yeah.
And I think it's hard because they just do a lot now. So yeah, sorry, continue.
Yeah, no. So it's funny because like for some situations, right? Like if I need one endpoint from a service, that seems like a pretty simple use case. It's like something like a Stripe integration is pretty rarely like a one endpoint and you're done sort of deal, right? It's SDKs, it's endpoints, it's probably a decent amount of account-specific setup and configuration. Now that you have agents that are capable of really long-running execution, right? I'm talking like define the desired behavior, walk away, and expect a functional result, right? How do you see the agent consuming that documentation and acting autonomously on it, right? Do you think that it's at a stage where you can leave it, trust it to pull the right documentation, walk away, or start running another task in parallel, put your attention elsewhere, and then come back and expect that the documentation has been digested and then acted on accurately?
Yeah, it's really a hit or miss thing, right? Sometimes it will do it, and often when it does do it, it will take a lot of attempts. It will have to load a whole bunch of web data. It will have to search multiple times to get the right thing, and then sometimes it just fails. And once it fails, it will just hallucinate and start writing. So the need for getting to the right answer or the right details quickly within a few tries is actually really important for a coding agent because they still kind of just even if it's long running, it'll just kind of fail, and then it'll write the wrong code, and then it'll try it, and then it'll fail, and then try again. So the task that takes an hour could have been done in a minute because you don't have access to essentially context.
So you actually said something interesting there. A few tries, right? So you can have a few tries in a couple ways. You can either have multiple shots going for the same task in parallel, right? So like a multi-shot approach, or you can trust that the agent, if you give it enough autonomy, right? If you give it enough autonomy to, let's say, access your API keys, and then actually, let's say, run a curl request to make that API call based on that third-party documentation. Hopefully you've set up a sandbox environment. Hopefully you're not doing this on your prod Supabase DB with a Supabase MCP, right?
Sure.
But yeah, like with a multi-shot approach, how much access are you comfortable essentially giving the agent when you're autonomously pulling and acting on third-party documentation? And where do you draw the line? Like, what are your personal safeguards, if you have them, when giving it that much autonomy, even if with a tool like Harvest?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think I generally tend to like when I'm providing the context to the agents right now and what to actually build. I think
Yeah,
that's where the safeguard really comes in. Is like how do you frame the step of what to take, right? If you are kind of like, hey, stop, don't. I often will tell it to like, hey, give me a plan before, right? And different coding tools have like these planning features. That's all fine, but like sometimes you kind of have an instinct of like, hey, what can go wrong, and you want to scope out could potentially happen. So I think there's like a planning step that's useful. I think it's
yeah,
useful to use to make sure you have API staging keys, right? That you have a secondary key that you're using so that you don't hit production data
yeah,
when you're. And then I almost always, especially if it's something that's like a newer greenfield integration, I will
yeah,
almost always first tell the agent to write it as a script. I will tell it to write it as a separate module, so it's nice and contained, even if it's a massive file. I'm just like,
yeah,
hey, write it as a self-contained thing that I can both look at, and I can, it's like we're not going to like blow up the rest of the code base. And so but you can pull from the other parts of the code base. I think that
yeah,
helps kind of get the integration started. And then you can build on top of it. All right, this is working. Let's put it into the code base. It's not unlike how I would do it, frankly, even myself. So I think it's just following, guiding it more down like a path of
yeah.
uh, simplicity and an incremental flow is I think tends to be the winning use case and the winning way to do it so far.
You mentioned so you mentioned two things that I want to touch on real quick. First, you said the word instinct, right? Your instinct about what's a safe line to draw, and I think that like I feel like I've earned a fair amount of good instinct as to, and by the way, instinct very hard earned, learned the hard way,
Sure. Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Right. Yeah.
Yes,
Agreed.
databases have been dropped, right? Things have been written to the database that should not have been, yada yada, right? Like, luckily, nothing like catastrophic, but still, instinct in a lot of cases is learned the hard way over a long period of time. So, how do you imbue the autonomous agent with that same sort of cautious instinct, especially when agents can still be so sort of eager to please and eager to be productive, right? Now, I know we're talking a little bit about like separate environments, but it's tricky because sometimes you have a separate environment, but you also want to test it in conjunction with the other logic or the other integrations that you've set up, right? Like if I have like a Stripe Jira intercom flow,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
How do all of these pieces of documentation and all the implementation from that documentation that I've pulled with Harvest, I want to test it all together, right? So instinct is hard earned. How have you earned that instinct to know, like, okay, this is where I draw the line?
Yeah. I mean, I think there's kind of things just about like you know maybe core software engineering, right? Like when it comes to letting the agent run, right? Making
Yeah,
sure, hey, actually writing to the database is something that's generally a lot more dangerous than reading. So those are
yeah,
things that we actually add to our rules. Whether it's Zencoder's rules or any of the coding agents kind of set of rules that you're using, agents that MU also works. And that I think that helps a bit is like certain things is like just avoid doing this when you're actually executing code, and then other parts are okay. Um, we've had like git reset dash hard kind of run,
yeah,
right, where it just
yeah,
like everything, right? So I think there is a little bit of like use it first, and I don't know. I actually, unfortunately, I think a lot of what it is rules that we've had to set. I think that the agents will kind of learn those kinds of things. I think they will train these in a way that's like a lot more, uh, defensive in some ways, and they are can be defensive in some ways. Um, but also, yeah, like your rules, your code base the best. You know what are the most dangerous things. I think it's important to set up rules in your AI IDE. I think on top of that, I think often good abstractions around each of these dependencies is actually really useful. What I mean by that is like you have, instead of just using like a specific, say you're using one that we've been doing recently is we've been integrating some like mixed panel data into some of our workflows.
Yeah.
And instead of just using mixed panel directly, we would generally wrap it in particular components, or wrap the mixed panel module. And then when we write unit tests, we get to test individual components of it that are bundled together. And then when we test it alongside other things like mixed panel plus stripe plus other pieces, you can test each one in isolation because each one can be unit tested and you can mock the other ones, right? I think when you want to build out these workflows, it's important to be able to turn them on and off so that you're testing one thing at a time. So I think unit tests really protect you here too. And then obviously once you're ready to run it, then you can put together the various wrappers and run tight scripts and test it in like flows like that. But I think that's where like making sure your code itself is modular and well crafted is important.
So, test-driven development.
Yeah,
definitely move. Because I mean, it's pretty APIs, endpoints at least, and well built SDKs. They inherently define the desired behavior if the documentation is robust, right? And when you can easily define the desired behavior, it's a lot easier for your agent to actually write useful tests, right? So if you know the desired behavior, then that opens up a level of discoverability, right? Because I know what I want. I know the desired behavior, right? I might not know which vendor, which platform, which solution would be the right one for that use case. I might have something in my mind, but how does Harvest handle discoverability, right? As the MCP for AI native documentation, AI first documentation, right? How do you handle being on top of all the new platforms, all the new vendors, all the new versions of existing platforms and vendors that are constantly coming out?
Yeah, I think the buy versus build question is a constant one that startups kind of face. If that's like it's like a question of, hey, do we just build this in house or do we integrate with the existing platform? It's actually something that we're actually considering as a front end product built on top of our context that helps you really make a simple decision. Give it your code base and say, hey, this is what I want to accomplish. How do we search and find this? So we essentially use a mix, right? We don't just use our structured data only. We use our structured data for implementation and for reasoning. And then we use fallbacks like existing search tools are actually still useful for getting answers for like what is the pricing, what might be some feedback from like a limit thread or something like that, right? So we combine a mix of conventional web search and our structured data to like fuse together both the decision of, hey, should I buy versus build this? Because the structured data helps you decide what it would look like when you build it, right? And then a lot of the decisions of scaling and vendor decisions are often sometimes review based. They're so I think that it's a blend of this like web search plus structured data.
So sitting on top of this essentially enormous knowledge base, right? What have you discovered about the world of documentation or about working with documentation and AI that you might have not known sort of coming into this, right? Because I bet you know now more ways to implement any given solution than most of us, right? Because most of us want to abstract that away to a platform like Harvest, right? So that we can get back to actually building the behavior without having to, spend all that time figuring out the solution part by ourselves.
For sure. I think, I think what we've found is that, documentation is often hit or miss. Even itself, documentation is definitely useful for understanding what the developer itself was intending or trying to build out. But often you still need the actual SDK, or you need the actual code, which is also something that we're indexing right now as well. We're moving into going deeper than the documentation. I think that's what we've learned, is that you have to go deeper than the documentation alone for you to provide a really high quality coding structured data set, and not just basically developer context beyond just what is expected in to provide a really good system for your coding engine to use. You got to go deeper than just documentation. You actually have to go into like private data. You have to bring this entire system together around the decision making of buy versus build and system design and product design. All of it is kind of linked together.
All right. Last two questions. With all this experience with documentation, what is your favorite set of documentation? It doesn't have to be an endorsement of the platform, but just documentation that you think is really well presented, well structured, readable.
It used to be. I would say it used to be Stripe, but I really didn't enjoy it that much the last few times.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah. It's just they've expanded in some ways too much. I have found.
I can go first, by the way. For me, it's actually Slack, just because there's a couple different ways to sort of build apps in Slack, and I'm actually curious how Harvest. I'm going to try that after this episode. Actually, I'm going to take Harvest and see if it can build me the kind of Slack bot that I want to see, because there's a couple of different ways to do it, and they're sort of all lumped in. They're all part of the same web portal, but it can be a little tricky to know like where to go for the guide, where to go for the API reference, and also like whether it makes sense to use SDK, whether or not, whether you should just go for the pure API or for the pure endpoint approach. So, but yeah, no, it's a favorite of mine. I'm actually going to try it after this. But I already have an account, right? So if I didn't have an account, what's the deal? How do I get one?
Yeah, I mean, I could probably, let me share my screen really quick here.
Like code optimizer, code explainer, there's refactoring agents, so like code optimizer.
All right, so I don't know if you're able to see it.
Software engineer.
There it is.
Yes. So you go to GoHarvest.ai. In this case, I was already signed in. I'm just going to sign out. You're essentially going to get started. Sign in.
Yeah.
And you can add it to cursor, code, Zencoder. In this case, you're just going to copy the code. I will rotate the view. Don't worry. And you can start using all of the structured data we've fixed, and you can even edit it out. So in this case, you just copy it and paste it to your.
Awesome. And folks, for all the Zencoder fans out there, Zencoder users out there, it's easier than ever in Zencoder because you can just go right to the tools panel, and Harvest is now available in our official tools catalog. So with one click, if you have an API key from Harvest, you can start abstracting away a lot of that really nitty-gritty documentation work today and let your agents do what they do best while you do what you do best.
Absolutely. Build protection around your code base. All right. Thanks so much.
Well, you have it straight from the source there. Ankur, thank you so much for taking the time today. Thank you for rolling with the punches here while we're at Web Summit Lisbon. It's great seeing you. And for everybody watching, go give it a shot. Let us know what you think. And we'll talk to you in the channel. All right.
Absolutely.
Bye, everybody.
See you.
Every day send me an update.